I am Phyllis Logan. We are so glad that you guys came out. All of our candidates were invited, as was stated earlier. We are a nonpartisan group, the NAACP. Many people will say the NAACP. The acronyms are the NAACP for me, so if you hear that, don't be confused, please. Being nonpartisan, our core object is to make sure that you hear what the government business is and how it's conducted and who represents us on the other side at those tables when they're discussing the flow of business for the state of Illinois. Our focus today is the Cook County, the 1st District, and they will let us know what that geographical area consists of. Pay attention if you live there. This is one of the potentials for having at-hand, close, upfront connection with the candidate. So, good luck to every one of them. We will start off with an opening statement from each candidate. I think they're given 2 minutes. Is it 2 minutes? 2 minutes opening statement, and please include as much as possible as it relates to the Cook County. And you'll have to speak within this mic. Thank you. We'll start with you.
Let me thank God for this opportunity. I'm Richard Boykin. Let me commend the NAACP President Carl Brinson and the entire group. I actually have had a long history of working with the NAACP, and I'm proud of it. I actually received the Humanitarian Award a couple of years ago for the work that we've done on the West Side. I've actually been working with the NAACP for quite a while. I actually penned a pamphlet, Understanding Your Rights Under the Fourth Amendment Against Unreasonable Search and Seizure, when I was in law school back in 1994. The Dayton branch of the NAACP actually had an opportunity to circulate this, and I want to give it to Ms. Logan so that they can put it in their archives as well. But I'm running for Cook County Commissioner, and I'm running because there's too much blood in the streets. Too many of our children are dying, senseless deaths. Too many people have lost hope and faith in government. We want to restore trust and faith in government, and we want to give people an opportunity to live again, to dream again. We want to bring opportunity back to the 1st District, and we want to bring jobs back. We want to bring corporations back who will create jobs. We want to bring job training grants from Washington, D.C. I spent 13 years working in Washington for 3 different members of Congress, Congressman Bobby Rush, Senator Carol Mosley Braun, and 10 years with Congressman Danny Davis. The last 8 years I've spent as a partner at Barnes & Thornburg Law Firm, where we've been an active participant in the community. We've given thousands of dollars to the NAACP over the last 8 years, me personally and my law firm. And so I'm proud to say that we're partners with the NAACP. We've worked with the NAACP against police misconduct. We've worked with them against the criminalization or targeting, if you will, of young African-American males. We have jail overcrowding at Cook County. We got to deal with that. We have a situation at the Juvenile Detention Center where we spend $600 per individual each day. We got to deal with that and reform that system. I want to do that. I hope that you'll stand with us and vote for Richard Boykin on Election Day, March 18th. Thank you so much. Well, this is good. This is good because I can always find something to say in another minute. But so some of the things that we're concerned about, obviously we're concerned about jail overcrowding. One of the signature issues of our campaign is mental health. I had an opportunity to tour Cook County Jail, and I was surprised to find out that the largest mental health institution was not a nursing home, was not a senior citizen building, was not a community health center, but in fact, the Cook County Jail. So we want to make sure that we bring the resources together so that a third of the people who are at Cook County Jail don't have to be there, but they can be receiving treatment. I'm proud to have fought for the Second Chance Act. So we passed the Second Chance Act in Congress with Congressman Danny Davis. I was there. I was one of the lead staff people on the bill. And that bill helps folks who are coming out of prison so that they can have an opportunity not to go back to prison. And so we're proud to have done that. I'm also proud to have stood with Congressman Danny Davis and doubled the number of community health centers. I mean, if you all know the Core Center, we helped put that there. I was the lead staff person on that. If you know Rush Presbyterian Hospital, we helped to get the new hospital built with federal money. The Safer Foundation, Bethel New Life. I can go on and on and on throughout this district of things that we have actually brought back. And so I'm asking for your support. I need your help on Election Day. Thank you. I'm Richard Boykin.
Good afternoon. I'm Ike Carruthers, and I too, like Richard, would like to certainly thank the NAACP for the invitation. I certainly would like to thank all of you all for coming out on such an inclement day. It's been very easy to look outside your window and say, well, not today. But thank you all for coming. I also would be remiss if I did not recognize Judge Mary Ann Jackson, who was here in the audience, a fine jurist from our community on the west side of Chicago. I'm running for this office for several reasons. First of all, you need to know something about me. I served this community as 11 years as the alderman and committeeman of the 29th Ward, where we sit today. Also, I served in the Central Committee as the first black executive vice chair of the Central Committee, elected by the 50 committeemen from the wards and 30 from the township and suburban areas. So I'm very familiar with government and the process. And now that I'm very familiar with it, I'm qualified. I'm qualified, I'm committed, and I'm experienced. If you look at my background in the 29th Ward, you will see what we did for this ward alone. We built schools that were not closed. New Dupree School, the new Ellington School, built from the ground up. Because I knew way back then, if you build schools from the ground up, they wouldn't be closed. The schools that were closed were schools that were older and dilapidated, but I knew schools from the ground up would still be there, and they're there today. We built hospitals. Look at the new Hartgrove Hospital that was built over Roosevelt Road under my leadership in the 29th Ward. We revitalized Madison Street. There used to be a time on the west side when you came from Oak Park to Chicago, it was so dreary that you would know you were in Chicago because it was so dreary. So we landscaped that area. We revitalized it. We put in new lighting. We put in medians. We put in flower beds to revitalize the west side of Chicago. We built senior housing. If you go over and look at the new Mount Vernon senior residential facility, I worked with Pastor Johnny L. Miller to build that facility from the ground up, 60 units of housing for seniors. And we did much more than that. We brought the first senior satellite to the west side of Chicago before they became popular over on the south end of the 29th Ward. So I understand how to leverage government. It wasn't all city dollars. You have to be able to leverage city dollars, county dollars, federal dollars to provide for our community. And that's what I've been doing and did for a long time. Now, certainly I'm not perfect. There's no question about that. One thing about being in public office, you're very public, and your life becomes very public. And I understand that. And I made mistakes in life. There's no question about that, and everyone knows it. But I can tell you what, that God saw me through. I am back. Like Donnie McClurkin said, we fall down and we get up. And I have human frailties. There's no question about that. I don't know anyone who does not have them. But I want you to know that I have overcome that, and I put the past behind me. I understand government. I understand how to bring people together. I understand how to improve a community. That's what I want to do for this first district. I want to improve it. I want to bring opportunity to this community. Everyone talks about jobs in this community. We need jobs in this community. I understand how to do that. And if you talk to anybody who knows anything about Ike Carruthers understood how to bring jobs back to the west side of Chicago. But moving forward, and I'll wrap up and say that every job I've had in my life, I've tried to make improvement for the community, and I can do the same thing for this district. Thank you so much.
So I just want to be sure. 2, 1, and blank, done. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to say to the NAACP, thank you for putting on this event. Usually, when I was with the NAACP in Oak Park, we had the NAACP Oak Park chapter, and we used to do these things in collaboration. And I think we still need to bring back that chapter in Oak Park because we still have a lot of issues and concerns in Oak Park that we need to still have a voice of independence from other groups that are not as involved in the type of things that the NAACP is in. So I welcome the NAACP in Chicago Westside to work to establish a Oak Park chapter again. My name's Ron Lawless, and I am glad to be over here on this side of town. This is Austin. This is home for me. I know this area. This area is like my backyard. There's nothing like being home and being able to talk about what you've done in your home. I used to come up this way a lot because I used to work with Bob LaFleur, the representative, who was one of our better representatives who unfortunately passed early on in his life where he wasn't able to finish a lot of the good things that he was trying to accomplish. But some of the things that he and I worked on while he was alive were things like St. Anne's Hospital. We try to keep it open. We try to save it. We knew that a hospital in our community was very vital and it was very important. Recently, we worked to keep the schools from closing here on the west side of Chicago. A lot of our schools were closing, and there was no justification for the closing. I have a hard time understanding how you can close a school and then find money for charter schools. I do really have a problem with that. And on the west side, the bulk of those schools were on the west side. We're in the heart of a community where over 60% of the residents have a criminal background. We have to address that. Even if we talk about bringing jobs, most of them can't get the jobs. So let's be honest about those jobs. We have one of the highest AIDS rates in the west side over here. Austin is the largest community in the city of Chicago. And I'm here to tell you, as a Cook County Commissioner, I want to address those issues. I want to address the real issues, the concern. I'm not going to give you a lot of fluff today. I'm not going to give you a lot of bells and whistles. I'm going to be straight up and honest with you. I'm not going to tell you something that I can't do because what's the point? We're doing the same thing that the other elected officials have done in the past, telling us, making us promises that they can't keep. So I'm going to be real with you today. We're going to have a real spirited discussion here today because I think we need to have that. Because you've got to make a decision on March 18th. Ron Lawless is looking for you to punch 106 many times. When I say many times, I'm hoping you call your family members and saying, hey, there's a guy that you need to be voting for. I like him, I like what he has to say, and I think what he has to say is important. So we're going to have a good, spirited discussion here today, and I look forward to having that discussion. And at the end of the day, I think that you will have an opportunity to know who you think is the best candidate for this position. And that's what this is all about. So let me get this over to Blake so we can get this party rolling. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me start by thanking the NAACP for giving us the opportunity to come and to speak to you all today. Let me tell you all about who I am. I was born and raised right here in the Austin neighborhood to a single-parent mom. My mom struggled to raise my brother and I alone. She was a member of Chicago Teachers Union. She still is today, and she's a clerk at a Chicago public school, John Hay Academy, just right around the corner. When I tell people I was born and raised in a single-parent home, they always make assumptions. But I never tell my story as a poor one. In fact, I like to say that I was rich growing up as a kid. Not with money, because we certainly didn't have a whole lot of that, but instead because of the values that she instilled in me and in my brother. Those values, her prayers, my hard work, the grace of God, allowed me to go on and to graduate from Princeton University with honors and the University of Chicago Law School. And now I'm an attorney at Jenner & Block here in Chicago. At Jenner & Block, I practice commercial litigation, but I also maintain a pro bono practice that includes prisoners' rights litigation, and I do handle sealing and expungement matters. What have I done? I'm currently a member of the NAACP branch here. I serve as the chair of the Legal Redress Committee. On that committee, I help single-parent mothers get access to the child support and things like that that they need. I also help ex-offenders get their records sealed and expunged so that they can find employment. I'm also on the board of several nonprofit organizations to serve the greater West Side, including Bethel New Life and Emoja Student Development Corporation. What do I want to do on the Cook County Board? There are three main things. First, overcrowding at Cook County Jail. I'm glad to see that we've started to move forward there by lowering bond payments so that people aren't staying there simply because they can't pay bond. What we also need to do is be sure that when people come out of Cook County Jail, they don't go back. The best way to do that is by helping them get jobs. I handled sealing and expungement matters on a pro bono basis at the Chicago Legal Clinic before I started at Jenner & Block. It's something that I still do today. I want to help people get access to those programs here in the 1st District. If we do that, we'll keep the population of the jail down, and our tax dollars won't go to subsidizing an inefficient jail. Instead, they'll go to the things that we need and the community programming that we want. 2 other things. Second, the Affordable Care Act. We have expanded healthcare access here. I want to work with organizations within the community to increase enrollment in county care so that we get the mental health services and the addiction counseling that we need in the 1st District. Thirdly, the land bank. I grew up next to a vacant lot. It lowers property value and makes you feel unsafe. I want to advocate to get land bank resources spent here in the 1st District for affordable housing and for business development. I can talk policy all day. I've talked to you about the things that I've done, but I'll tell you this, there's one thing that matters most in this race, and that's the people. You have choices, that's a great thing, but pay close attention. Who do you believe? Who do you trust? I'm the only candidate in this race who's ready to move Cook County forward. Again, my name is Blake Searcy. Thank you.
Our questionnaires are, let's see, Ms. Page, who's one of our youth committees members of the NAACP, and then Mr. Alex Lyons is one of our committee chairs with the local branch NAACP. So we'll go with Paige first, or who's first? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Logan. So, good afternoon, everybody. Like she said, my name is Paige, and I'm actually treasurer of the Westside Branch Youth Council. So, the first question for Mr. Richard. What would your role be as Cook County Commissioner? You have 1 minute.
My role as Cook County Commissioner is to do 4 things. 1, to legislate, pass ordinances that impact your lives, to appropriate, to fund the different entities or units of Cook County government, like the jail, like the Cook County Health and Hospital System, like the Forest Preserve, and like economic development. Right now, we're spending 40 to 42% of our budget on public safety. We're spending 35% on health care. We're not spending nearly enough, I don't think, on economic development. And then to investigate is the third thing. To investigate whenever there are issues within Cook County government that we think, need to be investigated. And finally, the fourth thing that most people don't get, and that is to advocate for things that you're concerned about that may not necessarily be within the charter, right? So school closings, right? To be an advocate against school closings that target unfairly the black community. To be an advocate for issues that are of concern and note to the people in the 1st District. And so that's what I hope to do, use my voice to be an advocate, but again, to appropriate, to legislate, to investigate, and to advocate. Those are the 4 things.
Same question.
Well, certainly, I certainly commend my colleague, Mr. Boykin, because certainly a couple of things are pretty much automatic. When you're elected by the people, the job itself calls for you to create legislation. There's no doubt about that. Also, it calls for you to appropriate, because you need to understand that all of the executive offices that come under the guise of the county board, all of their budgets are voted on by the 17 commissioners. So there's no question about that. But another thing that I think is very important, above what he said, is that you just have to represent the people and have a clear understanding and not be detached and get caught up sometimes in legislation, get caught up in the politics of appropriation, and represent the people. I think it's important for every politician, certainly for me, to hear what the people are saying in the district and make sure that I am advocating, as he indicated, on behalf of the people in the district, to provide leadership not only for the board, but provide leadership for other elected officials as well. I think it's important for us to understand that if all elected officials work together on behalf of common causes for the people, then we will be much further than what we are. It's not only the commissioner, but it's also the sheriff's office. It's also the county board. It's also the Cook County clerk. It's also the clerk of the circuit court. All those various offices working together. What you have today is you have a sheriff's office that's not in agreement with the president of the county board's office, and you have a state's attorney's office that's not in agreement with the public defender's office, all having different agendas. And what happens is the people are the ones who are hurt when these executives don't get along and fight amongst each other. So I think it's important to bring a cohesiveness and direction and strength to all elected officials.
I think, as we said, two of the things that you are responsible for once you're elected is legislation and appropriation. So I think those go hand in hand, and I don't think that I need to expound on those any further because I think the two previous candidates have done that. So I think one of the third things that has to happen, which I feel is one of the biggest things, is responsive. We don't have responsive elected officials in our community. Most of the time, if you ask, who is your commissioner, they'll say, I don't know. If you ask who your legislators are, I don't know. If I were to ask anyone in this room or outside this room, what does a commissioner do? Most people will go blank. That's inexcusable, folks. We are electing these people who have an impact on our lives. They affect our lives, and we need to know what they do so we know whether or not they're the right persons for that position. Also, we have what we call a structural deficit. We don't raise enough money to pay our bills. We just raise enough to just get along, to get things done. We can't continue to run government like that. Here's what's going to happen. We got a pension reform issue with the county board that hasn't been talked about. We've talked about the state. We talked about the city. For those of you who work for the county, it's coming. I think it's totally unfair that for county workers or any public worker to have paid their fair dues into the system and that the legislators give holidays and not pay their fair dues, and now because they can't do what they had promised you, they now want to change the rule. That is totally unfair. I will fight against that, not because it's for public workers, it's the right thing to do. When you pay it's a contract. You sign a contract that says, we're going to do X, Y, Z, and you're going to do X, Y, Z. You can't break the contract in the middle of the road. So those are some of the things that I think we're going to do. One more last thing, the forest preserves. We don't utilize the forest preserves, especially here in Chicago. We need to have a separate board. And the reason we need to have a separate board is because most of us who are going to be sitting on the county board know very little about forest preserve issues. So we need to have experts and professionals running that part of our county government. Thank you.
Before policy, before legislation, I have one main role as Cook County Commissioner, and that's to be an ethical and responsible commissioner that you know you can trust. When we started this campaign back in August, I made it a point to get out and to reach and to contact voters. We were at train stops in 95-degree weather, handing out pieces of literature and talking to people about county government, to anyone who was willing to listen. I firmly believe that the way people campaign is the way that they govern. If you don't see somebody when they're campaigning, if they're not willing to come to your coffee clutch, if they're not willing to be at that train stop to get your vote, to talk to you about the issues that matter, you're not going to see them when they get in office. If elected, that will be my responsibility, to be a commissioner who you know, one who you trust. Even if we don't get along, even if we don't agree on every issue, you'll know that Blake is somebody who I get up every day to fight for you, to fight for the First District, for the resources and the representation that we deserve.
We know when you run for office, normally you run because you have issues that are important to you. What are your top 3 personal priorities if you're elected? And what is your strategy to implement those priorities?
And you will have 2 minutes on this question, correct? Who wants to go first? Huh? Well, let me start from this end. I apologize. I don't want to do any, meeny, miny, mo. Okay. And and then if you'll just pass it down, so, 2
Sure.
minutes.
Thank you. 3 main issues that we focused on in this race that are very important to us. The first, overcrowding at Cook County Jail. We all know about the issue. We know about the overcrowding. There are so many people being detained at Cook County Jail who haven't even been convicted of a crime. They're there because they can't afford bond payments. We have to continue to work to find ways to lower the population at Cook County Jail. One way that I want to do that is through sealing and expungement programs. We get people's criminal records covered, we can help them find jobs. This is something that I've done in the past with the Chicago Legal Clinic, and it's something that I continue to do as an attorney. But let me tell you specifically why this is important to me. I can talk about degrees, I can talk about where I work, but guess what? When I drive home every night to Austin, people don't see that. They see a 6'2", 230-pound young black man. The people who are going to Cook County Jail, they look exactly like me. It is a moral imperative to me that we lower that population. It's not just a policy issue. Secondly, affordable health care. I've been excited to be a part of the Illinois Medical District Commission. I've served on that commission since 2012. I've been a part of a new board that helps revitalize that area. Since just last year, 2013, I was appointed treasurer of that commission. I'm proud to be the youngest person to serve in that capacity and to be the only person from the far west side of Chicago offering representation to us on that board. I serve on that board as a volunteer. I don't make a single cent on it. I do it because I'm passionate about healthcare in our community. We have got to get more people on the west side of Chicago enrolled in the increased Medicaid that we now have in our county due to the Affordable Care Act. And finally, land banking. I mentioned growing up next to a vacant lot, and for anybody who's had a similar experience, you guys know how bad that is. Not only on your property values when you look to sell, but just on your daily life living there. Used to have a small rim in my mom's backyard. When I used to miss a shot, and let me be honest with you guys, I missed a lot, never been much of an athlete. That ball would bounce off the rim, go onto the vacant lot, and I have to go over there and get that ball. That lot was filthy, to put it politely. We've got to get properties on vacant lots, and we've got to put foreclosed properties back to use. So those are the 3 issues that I'm focusing on.
I think the 3 issues that are important to me are, one, I'm going to work with the state legislators. One that I believe is very important is that a lot of our young men and young women are falsely arrested, falsely prosecuted, and then if they are successful in winning their case or the cases are dropped against them, they still have an issue. They still have a record out there. I think when those young people are falsely accused and falsely arrested by the city police or whatever municipality that they're in, that municipality should pay to have their records expunged. Why should they have to foot the bill for something that they didn't do because some zealous police officer or some rogue police officer decided they wanted to pick up on some African-American kids? So I think it should be the responsibility of that municipality to pay for those expungements and make sure that when that kid or that young person walks out of that court or that record or that charge is dropped, that they don't have to worry about their records being expunged, which means they can't get a job because they thought they didn't have a record because they didn't go to jail. They don't understand that process. Number 2, we got to increase the revenues. The reason we got to increase revenues, we have to increase them because we have services that we have to provide. If we cannot provide the services, then what's our purpose? We still have healthcare issues that we have to address, public health issues that we have to address. We still have to raise money in order to pay the bills. If we're not raising money, then we're not going to be able to provide the services. Third, I am in agreement with Commissioner Sufferton, where he wants to put forth a bond program where bonds are paid for those individuals who cannot afford to get out of prison. A lot of people are in prison today because they can't afford to get out. Maybe because they had a small amount of marijuana. Maybe they got a DUI. But the bottom line is that they can't afford to get out of prison because they don't have those funds. But then it impacts that whole family because that person who may have a DUI because he did something stupid may be the breadwinner, and because he's in prison and he can't get out, that impacts the whole family, but it also impacts the whole community. So at the end of the day, those are some of the 3 things that I think really are things that really impacts the 1st District more than anything. So I have to look at what impacts the 1st District, and those are the issues that I think we need to address as when I become Commissioner of the 1st District.
There are certainly a number of things that we need to deal with regarding the 1st District, but, and I'm not going to say necessarily in this order, but economic development is key. We have to rebuild our communities. If we rebuild our communities with economic development, opportunities, so folks can go into businesses to help entrepreneurs, then that's going to automatically create opportunity in terms of employment. See, we need to be able to have businesses in our community that can employ folks from our community. So that's very important. Secondarily, I think it's important to do something about our criminal justice system. As we sit here today, there are probably 10,000 people sitting in Cook County Jail right now. The jail was only built to hold 10,153 people. It's always at 90% capacity or more. A lot of those folks need to be home right now on electronic monitoring. They don't need to be sitting in jail where it costs every single taxpayer $143 a day. That's what it costs us, $140 a day to keep them in jail for nonviolent crimes. And they can be sitting at home on electronic monitoring and linked to a training program or a job service so that they can actually work. Thirdly, I think we can't do anything without the money. So we have to prioritize our budget. Because if you follow the money, then you find out where the heart and the soul really is if you follow the money. And we have to do something about the budget because as all of the debts go up for Cook County, all the fees go up for Cook County, the revenue is decreasing. We got by this time because of the Affordable Health Care Act. We got by. And we got an influx of money because of that. And it allowed us, we realized about $100 million just because of that alone. And it stabilized Cook County Hospital with 115,000 people signing up for county care. But next time around, we're not going to have that. We're not going to have that. And you're going to see a deficit in Cook County budget we're going to have to deal with. So I think those things, not necessarily in that order, but those are certainly three things that are very important for us to deal with.
I want to appreciate the gentleman for the question. One of the first things I would do is make sure that we set up a number of task forces around all of the issues in the district. What I've learned from Congressman Danny Davis is that listening to the people is an important thing. And we drove legislation, the Second Chance Act was driven from the district. It wasn't driven from Washington, but from the district, input from the people. Economic development is important, but we got to have safe streets. So I'll work with Sheriff Tom Dart. I'm pleased to have Sheriff Tom Dart's endorsement. I'll work with Sheriff Tom Dart to make sure that our streets are safe. Because if you don't have safe streets, businesses aren't coming. You can forget about that. They're not coming. We'll work to make the streets safe. We'll work to reduce the violence in our community. Too many of our young people are dying, too much blood in the streets. And we'll bring the jobs. I'm pleased to have the endorsement of the Illinois Black Chamber. I think the Illinois Black Chamber endorsed us because, and I think, Mr. Timekeeper, something's wrong with my time here because you're running it fast, but it's okay. It's okay. I watch the clock myself and talk at the same time. The Illinois Black Chamber has endorsed us. And so they understand that we understand how to work with businesses. I agree that we got to do something in terms of criminal justice reform. I've had a chance to tour Cook County Jail twice with Sheriff Tom Dart. A third of the people there shouldn't be there, according to him, because they're mentally ill. And the greatness of a nation is judged by how well we treat our senior citizens, how well we treat our children, and how well we treat those who are struggling and sick among us. And we're losing that battle right now. So I want to work to make sure that we reform the criminal justice system, reform the juvenile detention center, and make sure that the 250,000 individuals in Cook County who currently don't have health care sign up for county care. That's what we do. Thanks.
Question number 3, and once again, this is for everybody. With the county budget being millions of dollars, with the county budget being millions of dollars, what experience do you have with managing a budget of this magnitude? Also, what were the 3 top items funded? So all of you will each have 2 minutes.
Now we're testing the candidates to see if they've studied for these positions, right? We'll start with you, sir.
I want to thank the gentlelady for the question. Actually, the county budget is a little bit over $3 billion. And the top three items in the county budget that are being funded, 40 to 42% of it is public safety in the jail. That's the number one item. The number two item is healthcare, 35% of the budget. And then the other piece of it would be the forest preserve part of the budget. I think we need to spend more on economic development. I think we need to spend more on economic incentives for businesses to come back into the first district. We'll work hard to make sure that that happens. We'll work with Republicans on the county board and with Democrats on the county board to bring the issues to the forefront of the first district. Let me tell you, I'm not just going to be satisfied with getting our fair share of resources. Spending 13 years in Washington and understanding that if you're not at the table, you're not engaged, you're not at the debate, I understand that. I was chief of staff for Congressman Danny Davis. I ran a budget of $1.4 million and 22 staff people when I was with him. Right now, I'm a partner at Barnes & Thornburg, which means that I'm an owner of the law firm. We have 600 lawyers at the law firm. That's a $500 million corporation that we're running, 12 offices around the country, 600 lawyers that we're responsible for. And so I'm proud to say that we have experience in doing this. This is my first time of running for public office, and I'm proud of that. But I've been in the background, and I've also managed things. I was manager of an ice cream pizza parlor. It was my first job when I was 15. I managed 6 other people, and I had to be responsible for counting the money at night and making sure that, that things added up. And so that's my experience, and that's what I'd bring to this race.
Thank you. Certainly, there's no question that health care is the biggest expenditure for all county government. Over $1 billion of the $3.2 billion budget is spent on health care. 1/3 of it going off the top. For a county hospital alone, every year, $500 million is spent to subsidize county hospital for people who just can't pay, $500 million. And there's no question as well, the pension plan. When people retire from county government, that alone takes care of almost 1/3 of the budget. It is amazing how much we spend. It's not a lot of money to go around once you start talking about the health care system, the pension plan, and then the forest preserves. A lot of money is spent. But in terms of managing money, when I was deputy commissioner in the city of Chicago for streets and sand, I managed a budget of $54 million. I had over 500 employees. Everybody driving a plow, everybody who was in the loop area doing cleanup, every garbage truck, all of them worked for me when I was deputy commissioner of street operations. I understand about managing large budgets at $54 million that I had to manage. So that's not a surprise to me. When I was in city council, you got to realize the budget for the city of Chicago was double that of the county. Our budget was $6 billion that we had to oversee. So now we're talking about a budget of $3.2 billion. So I'm well equipped, qualified, and ready to manage a budget of that magnitude.
Well, I'm glad to hear that the candidates are picking up some of my themes. Makes me feel good, and I think that's a good thing. So let me talk about the 3 things that you mentioned: public safety, our health care, as well as the forest preserves. We are fortunate enough through the Affordable Care Act that we have been able to get our health care budget in order. Because of that, we have been able to save money, and President Prepwinkle has been able to reduce a $470 million deficit to down to 157 million. And still, we are still reducing that budget. We've also found money to create a redeployment program so our youth who are now being arrested don't have to go into a detention center. They can have alternative programs that they can participate in. That's something that just happened recently with the passing of House Bill 2401. Also, county government does not have a revenue problem as much as they have a spending problem. We tend to spend money in areas that make no sense. We give out contracts that are not, you know, let's look at the city. We look at contracts we give to our friends and people that have abused these contracts and so on and so forth. And when I was with the Illinois State Board of Education, I managed the parent involvement portion of the NCOB grant, which is over $3 billion. And 300 million of that was my responsibility to ensure that every school district in the state of Illinois received that parent money and made sure that that money was used for parent involvement programs. As I said earlier today, CPS was one of those districts that seemed to use the money for everything but parents. And you know, people always say they want elected officials that will hear them. The problem is that everybody says, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to hear you. But when there's a time to be heard, they don't hear you. Good example, our mayor. When the schools were being closed, we asked them not to close our schools. Give us a chance to be heard. But they didn't let us be heard. I apologize for going over.
I'll start by discussing the three things that I want to fund. First, I do think we need to continue to fund healthcare. That has to be a priority so that people in our community get the mental health services and the addiction counseling in addition to all the other medical services that they need. Secondly, restorative justice. We must put an emphasis on restorative justice, moving away from mass incarceration, especially of black and brown men. We have to move away from that. President Prankwinkle has a joke that she says that if you look at Cook County Jail, you think there were no white people in Cook County. I think that's a good point because the people tend to look a lot like me and a lot like me and you. The third and final thing, economic development. But when I say economic development, I want to focus on small businesses. Ones like the one that you all here in this community have, like Sankofa, where we sit here today. I want to be sure that the county is playing a role in that and being sure that we make a priority in investing in people, not in corporations. The three experiences I've had that I'll bring to this, working with a budget, let's start first with the Illinois Medical District Commission. The Medical District is the largest of its type in the entire country. It's a major economic engine. I joined the commission in 2012 at a very tough time. I am proud of the work that I've been able to do with my fellow commissioners and our staff, and it takes a team, and that's the best part about it. Joining the Cook County Board, I'm going to have to work with other commissioners and the Cook County Board President and elected officials at all levels to try to get the results that we want to see in the first district. So the medical district has helped me with that. The second thing, Umoja Student Development Corporation. It's a nonprofit that works with children. I'm curious, just show of hands, how many of you guys work with nonprofits? Either own them, volunteer? I love nonprofits because you're trying to do good work, the God's work, oftentimes on not a lot of money. And you get to a point where you're looking at your budget, and we were at this point with Umoja, and we say, how are we going to get to the end of the year? But you go and you find private sources of money, grant funding, you make it work. The final thing, I see time, and thank you, timekeeper, I appreciate you. The final thing, the final point, I didn't learn a lesson any better about budgeting than the ones I learned on the 900 block of Laurel, where I grew up with Vita Bennett, Malia Bennett, and Darlene Bennett, my mom and my two aunts. They taught me stories about being a good steward about the resources that you have, and so I'll bring that to the Cook County Board.
We have all acknowledged that Cook County Jail has an overcrowding crisis. What is your position on smaller grassroots organizations being a daily reporting resource to address the overcrowding? What will you do to ensure this process is implemented?
Once again, guys, 2 minutes.
I appreciate the question. I think we can do a couple of things. One, I think we can begin to look at how do we get individuals who can't afford to bond out, how do we get them to bond out under their own individual signature? And how do we get them under electronic monitoring? I think that will reduce the population at the jail very quickly. I think that if we fund mental health services, a third of the people who are currently there will then be able to leave Cook County Jail and get their mental health treatment through community health centers and through not-for-profit organizations like the Bobby E. Wright and others. Thirdly, I think that we got to figure out a way to speed up justice, right? Too many people are waiting for their cases to be heard 3 and 4 and 5 years. That is cruel and unusual punishment. We have to make sure that if we need to hire more public defenders, if we need to hire more judges, hire more state's attorneys, then we need to do that. In this way, people can then have their cases heard, and we can speed up the day of justice for each and every individual. Now, I plan to work with Chief Judge Timothy Evans. I plan to work with State's Attorney Anita Alvarez and Sheriff Tom Dart to make sure that we implement these things and make sure that we speed up the day for justice for all of those individuals who are down at Cook County Jail. It was not meant to be a permanent facility to detain people. It was meant to be a short-term detention center, if you will, or detention place. And what we've done is we've sort of abused that and turned it into a long-term facility that's costing taxpayers millions.
Thank you. I do agree that we certainly need to make changes. I think that it would be appropriate to talk about some linkages between community organizations for nonviolent offenders. Every day I wake up and I'm an executive at the Safer Foundation. Last year we put 4,000 people to work, and every day I'm looking for training programs for individuals who need opportunities, and all of them have criminal background. I have found out that it works when people have training and know how to do something, and you can place them in jobs. Also, I think it's important to utilize and maximize electronic monitoring. Right now, today, if the sheriff wanted to, he could have 1,500 people out on electronic monitoring. But you know how many he has out? 250. And it's all political. It's just really all political, because no one wants to face the fact that if somebody is let out on electronic monitoring and then they do something, now that becomes a big issue for that sheriff. So it's safer for him to keep them on the inside. I do agree with President Tony Prepwinkle to let more people out, and that's why she's advocating to take their responsibility on, so at least we can go up to 1,500 people. There are hundreds of people sitting there that could be out today, but they're not, just because the sheriff simply won't let them out. Also, I think we need to talk to the state's attorney's office. First of all, the state's attorney has the prerogative as it relates to charging people. They decide on who to charge and who not to charge. I gotta tell you, depending on what community you come from or where you are, you might not get charged for that same crime depending on where you are, because the state's attorney has the ability to make those decisions, and it happens all the time. So we need to have that conversation with the state's attorney about how we are charging people. And here we talk about Colorado. Colorado made marijuana legal. So that's something that we need to look at and have that conversation in terms of how they get in, and then have linkages for how they can get out. Thank you.
I don't know if you're aware that 60% or more of the county jail residents are from Chicago. And I always ask the question, is people only in Chicago breaking the law? You know, I think, as you said earlier today, as you were saying, they look like us a lot, but I just have a problem with 60% of the jail population being from Chicago. You know, the Appleseed Foundation has done some studies about what we can do to move justice faster for these individuals that are in prison. And I agree with Alex that we need to do more coordination with organizations in the community like the Safer House Foundation and any other groups the Westside Health Authority are another example of organizations that are working to ensure that we have some ways of doing some things that can improve those individuals who are in prison by letting them out so they can be out on electronic monitoring for nonviolent offenses. I think that we have a population of prisoners, as Ike has said, who are in prison because of politics. It's all because of politics. And these people's life are being put on hold. And the Constitution guarantees that everybody has a speedy trial. Also, I think that giving Tony the authority to let these prisoners out is a very smart move. I commend her for being courageous on wanting to do that, because like Ike said, it could come back to haunt her. But one of the things I would do is I like to meet with judges who are dealing with these cases and find out what are some of the things that they think are some of the problems as to why these cases are not moving faster in the court. They're the judges. They're sitting there. I want to know if the state's attorney office is dropping the ball. I want to know who's actually dropping the ball. I can talk to Anita after I find out from the judges what they feel are some of the problems. I think you have to go to the source to first find out where you start to get the solutions. So at the end, and then House Bill 2404 is a bill that was put in place that now allows young people who are 17 instead of 16 to be charged as an adult. So you have to be 17 to be charged as an adult. I'll give you a good example. If a young person stole a cell phone that was $150, it would be a juvenile offense. But if they stole one that was over $400, it would be a adult offense. And therefore, it's just that they're the same age, but they're going to have different consequences.
I believe to tackle this problem, we need a twofold approach. I'd echo everything that's been said about finding ways to reduce the population of Cook County Jail, particularly looking at bond payments and releasing people on monitored release. The numbers are shocking. Costs taxpayers $140 a day to house someone at Cook County Jail. Costs about $30 a day to let someone out on supervised release. I'm not a math major, I wasn't in college, but I know we can all do the math and see that it makes more sense for taxpayers to let people out on supervised release. Obviously, we want to keep our streets safe, though. We need to be sure we do it carefully, and we focus on nonviolent and first-time offenders. The second part of this approach is working with organizations within the community who can empower two groups that I think we need to focus on, and that's ex-offenders and young people. Mr. Carruthers, he mentioned the Safer Foundation. They do great work in that field. And I want to talk about two other groups. One is Bethel New Life, and the other one is Austin Polytechnical Academy. What these two organizations do, Bethel works with ex-offenders, and Austin Polytechnical Academy works with students. They help students get this thing that's called a NIMS credential. Now, there are people who are going to tell you that manufacturing is dead, especially on the west side of Chicago, but let me tell you, that's not the case. There are manufacturing jobs out there for people who are qualified and ready to take these jobs. Bethel, working with ex-offenders, and Austin Polytech, working with young people in our community who are in the high school, help them get access to this NIMS credential. We know that college might not be for everyone, but if we can get more people access to these types of credentialing, they can get good jobs, good wage jobs where they can feed themselves, feed their families, and have access to health care. We need to continue at the county to empower organizations in our community that do that invest in those two populations, both ex-offenders and our children.
Let me get to our next question, which is from the audience, and this is a question from our youth's perspective. I had to ask the question myself so that I could relate to it. This is the same question that our youth asked the NAACP leadership at our October 2013 State Conference of Branches. What will a leader for the youth need to look like and do? And will the leader look like Chief Keith? Kev? Come on, stand up. Our youth will expound on that some more so you guys can have a better perspective of who this potential leader may be that's creating possibly havoc, so I'm understanding. So, okay.
All right, so in a nutshell, if you're not familiar with Chief Keef, perhaps you're familiar with Notorious B.I.G. Imagine him times 7. Now, just a little bit on his subject matter, the glorification of drug dealing, gang banging, oh my goodness, death, destruction, destroying yourself ultimately, like I said, by the usage of drugs. You guys get the point. So, nonetheless, this is a huge figure in our youth. His bandwidth, for example, if you go on Twitter, is in the millions. So, what does a leader really look like? I'd have to say myself, not that particularly. However, let's see what the candidates might think. I'm so sorry. Well, you know what? Why not? You know what? And I was thinking that earlier. We might as well. So, we'll start with Mr. Carruthers. Here you go.
I think that is really an interesting perspective because all too often, right now today, if you look at our young people, and you have to wonder about the influence, not only of people like Chief Keef, but also about the influence of just television, period. And all of the rappers who decide to make a decision that they're going to do, those who still doing gangster rap, where they are deroding women, where they're glorifying money and glorifying alcohol. And it's very unfortunate that I do believe that all of that does have a bearing and influence young folk. But I do think that the leader has to look like what his ideas are, what his philosophy is, and what his values are. I think the values are the number one thing for our young folk, particularly the values of education. I don't care how you say it, slice it, shake it, bake it. Education is tantamount for anybody trying to make an opportunity in this life. You have to have some kind of education. Then you have to have also some concern about people. You know, life now today among some of these young folk, it doesn't mean anything. Many of them don't even think they're going to make it to 20 years old or 21 years old because of what they're involved in. So I think that we have to create a value system, but we also have to listen to what their struggle is as well and understand that maybe they came from a situation where they didn't have any values. Maybe they came from a situation where they didn't have any opportunity, they didn't have any education, the schools were not proper in their communities. So I think that it's a real social issue. There's no silver bullet to deal with that issue because it's so huge, but I do think that education, values, and then the leader should look like his values. I think that is the key. And if he had the right values and had the same kind of leadership, 1,000 people following him, thousands of people, look what he could do with it. But the fact is that people tend to sometimes have leadership skills, but they go in the wrong direction. And that's certainly his case. And I think my time might be up. Thank you. Thank you, Princess.
A really profound question. It's really the state of our community right now. Really, a child can't be what a child can't see. And so the children have to see something better. We did this thing called the State of the African American Male. And the reason why we did it is because when you look at every statistical category, black boys drop out of school faster than anybody else in the country. And they drop into jails, and they drop into the graveyard. Black men suffer disproportionately from jail incarceration, from prostate cancer, from every negative malady you can think of. There was a situation where we saw this young woman who owned this car. She had a guy on the passenger side, her boyfriend. The music was blasting, and they pulled into a gas station. She got out of the car and she pumped the gas, not the guy. Values turned upside down. We have to give parents who may need some help a little help in terms of parenting. We have to give them that help that they need. I grew up in a single parent home. My father made sure that I went to school. He made sure. I grew up in Inglewood, one of the most difficult communities in all of America. Drug dealing, gang banging. But my father made sure that the four of us stayed out of that. And he made sure that we went to school. And so I went to undergrad and I went to law school and I played athletics. athletics is good because when you get knocked down on the football field, you got two options: get back up or stay down. And I got back up. That's what we need.
Chief, Keith is his name, correct? Yeah. I kind of know a lot about him because it seemed like every time I got my Sun-Time paper, he was the feature story about should he go to jail, should he be let out, and so on and so forth. That's what I know about him. I mean, I know he's an artist and all that stuff. And when I look at that, and I say to myself, the problem with this individual is that we're not picking our role models. We're not picking who is going to be the people we give record deals to. He is a product of the music industry. He's a moneymaker. They don't care about him being a bad boom, 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 whatever. He's making money, and if it means lives are going to be lost, they don't care. So, and you know, at the end of the day, we have to determine who are going to be our role models. You know, we got a lot of people up here. You got Richards up here. He's a minister. That says a lot. You have Ike up here. He's been a leader of the community. You have a fine young man here who comes from a single-family home, went to one of the best colleges in the country, and at the end of the day, I think the role models should be looking like us. They should be us. We're good examples. We don't have to find them. We're here. There's a young man right there who's holding the numbers. I know he can do a lot more, because I think you did some poetry, didn't you? Okay, but nevertheless, he's somebody we need to be looking up to. When I was growing up, I used to think my mother was the meanest person in the world, because she made us go to church every Sunday while everybody else was out playing. But I didn't understand the value of going to church. I didn't understand the value of knowing that you need to have something to believe in order to move forward. See, I've run for office several times. As Richard said, you get knocked down on the football field, and you got to get back up. See, I believe in what I am doing. That's why I run. Whether I win or not, it's not the issue. I believe in what I'm doing because I believe we have to have a voice. We have to have leadership. Leaders don't always have to be elected officials. Sometimes it's better that they're not elected officials. I mean, I'm just being honest, you know? And we're dealing with institutionalized racism. That's another problem that we're dealing with. You know, we got a lot of things going good in this community. So when you talk about who should they look like, we're in a great example of that right now.
Thank you, Ron. I think the question that you ask is so pivotal, looking at the moment where we're at right now, and to be frank, being someone who is still looked at by people as a very young person. First, though, I want to talk about looks, this thought of what a leader looks like. I want to separate what Chief Keef looks like from the things that he says. The things that he says are not at all representative of what a leader should be in our community. But what he looks like, I don't care if you have dreads, I don't care if you keep your hair short like me, I don't care if you got an afro, no hair, dark skin, light skin, tattoos, no tattoos, you can be a leader. You don't have to go to a great school, you don't have to go to a name brand place to be a leader and a leader in our community. And I think everybody should know that, and that's something that I've always believed. I was always told as I grew up that I don't care what school you go to, you're always gonna be a product of this community, period. The things that you do most in life, the things that matter the most in this life, are the ones you do for your family, for the people you love, your neighborhood, and for God, period. I'm running this race with a small hope of also being someone who young people can look at and say, wow, that's what I want to be. And let me tell you, that's hard for me. I don't like to put myself in that situation because I'm a very fallen person. I've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's hard to say, wow, maybe I'm somebody who others might want to emulate. But if I can just show one person, one young person somewhere on the west side of Chicago that there's better for them than what they might see on a daily basis, then this wasn't in vain, this whole race. And so that is what I believe leadership should look like. I believe you're a leader. I know the young man who's keeping the time as a leader. I know you're a leader because I work with your mom on the NAACP, and I'm happy to see young people sitting in the front and taking a very active role in this process.
We now have questions from the audience now, and this is a twofold question here. So when I ask it, one's short, and the other one has a little wind to it, but you'll be given 1 minute to answer. The first question for all of the candidates If you are not elected in the primary election, will you support the winner? And then the second question part to that is, what boards do you currently sit on that assist with helping our communities? Got that? Okay.
To answer the first question, yes. This race is about us. This race is far bigger than me. I will support the winner in any way that I can to help improve the first district. The second question, I mentioned that I serve on the board of Bethel New Life. Bethel is a nonprofit that does community development work in East and West Garfield Park, Austin, throughout different places on the west side of Chicago. I'm also active with Emoja Student Development Corporation. Emoja works with several schools on the west side, including Manley High School, which isn't in our district, but you guys know that's in the Lawndale area. I'm also on the associate board of the Sergeant Shriver Center. So the Shriver Center is a national advocate for low income and people in poverty. And one of the main issues that Shriver is working on right now is increasing the minimum wage. That is an issue that I'm very passionate about. We need to have a minimum wage that is at least $10 an hour. And I support President Obama in trying to push the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. Another group, Fenwick High School. I serve on their Academic Affairs and Diversity Committee. And I know for a lot of you guys, you might be thinking, well, Fenwick's in Oak Park, but let me tell you why Fenwick, I believe, can serve the west side of Chicago. I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to go to that school, that I had a mom who said, you know what, we're gonna try to get you into a good place. And so I worked hard in grammar school and was able to go to Fenwick. I wanna make sure that Fenwick is a place that is more diverse. I love the school. It's gotta do better there, and I'm glad to be a part of that process because there are so many kids on the west side of Chicago who are very intelligent, more intelligent than I am or ever will be, who could succeed there and then go on to have great opportunities. So those are just a few organizations in addition to, of course, the Westside Branch of the NAACP, where I serve as the Legal Redress Committee Chair.
As for the first question, the answer is yes. I mean, as Blake said, this is not about me. It's not about anybody but you. That's why I'm running, because I think it's important that whoever wins this seat, I think we are going to be moving in a much better direction than what we have been in the past. So I'm looking forward to whomever we are, whoever it is that wins. I'm on the Illinois PTA. I'm their legislative director. That means that I'm working for every child in Illinois to ensure they get the quality education that they need and deserve. I'm fighting to ensure that funding is appropriate throughout the state of Illinois. Right now, Illinois underfunds its public education. And if you don't live in a district or a community where they can subsidize the difference, your education suffers. Such as Oak Park. Oak Park can make up the difference, whereas in a city like, in a village like Maywood and Bellwood, they probably can't make up the difference. So there's going to be a lacking of funding. So that means where someone is spending $8,000 per pupil, the city of Maywood or Bellwood may be spending only $4,000. Also, I'm a part of the Spencer Parent University, which is one of the best things that's happened here on the west side. If you are not familiar with it, I suggest that you really get to know Spencer Parent University. It's one of those places where parents are given tools and materials on how to be better parents and to be better engaged in their children's education. I'm also on the West Suburban Hospital Ethics Board. There we talk about ethics that address what we need to do when we have certain issues that come across across the hospital, which are concerning people's decisions to make life decisions, or just working with doctors who might have been not so friendly with their bedside manners, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the things that I'm doing to improve our community and make our community better. I've always been involved in the community. Austin is my home. Austin is my heart. I was with the Austin JCs before I got older. I couldn't be a part of that anymore. So I've been involved in this community, and I continue to be, and I want to continue to be involved even beyond as an elected official.
Thank you, Ryan. I've always supported Democrats. Being a former Democratic committeeman, I've always supported Democrats. In fact, when I think back when even Congressman Danny Davis made it known that he was going to run and seek the office of the President of the County Board, it was I who gave the nominating speech for him in the Central Committee. So I've always supported Democrats, and I always will. I remember in 1984 when Jesse Jackson said, I'd rather have Roosevelt in a wheelchair than Reagan on a horse. That made a lot of to-do amongst the community, but I just believe that Democrats have the right ideals for our folk and will give the right opportunity for us to move forward. And I can tell you, if you look at the Republican Party, I don't care how you slice it, how you look at it, if you look at the trouble that our president is going through today as a result of the Republican Party, there's no way that I can support Republicans. There's no way at all, because their whole agenda is to undercut particularly those who need more, the least of thee. And that's why I would always support the nominated Democratic Party. I work with the Austin Coming Together group that I recently, probably for the last year or so, joined under leadership of Pastor Reginald Backus in terms of trying to bring opportunities to folk on the West Side. We have a work collaborative, and I bring the Safer Foundation in as well to be part of that. I'm also part of the Illinois Manufacturing Association, a member of that group, because I understand there's opportunity in manufacturing. And so I put folks in training programs. I just recently placed a young man into a job in a manufacturing corporation. Young man has background, he had issues, couldn't find a job. I got him into a training program. Now he's making $13 an hour in manufacturing. That can be duplicated all over, but we have to get involved in these training programs, and once we do that, then there will be opportunity.
I am pleased to support the nominee for this office, and I hope that that nominee is Richard Boykin. I sit on 4 boards. The first one is the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired. It's an organization that's doing tremendous work. I talked about the disparities that exist relative to African Americans. We suffer disproportionately from diabetes as well, and as a result, it leads to glaucoma and to blindness. And so the Lighthouse does tremendous work in the community. Currently, they have an unemployment rate of 75%. Now, one of the things that we recently did, and I'm proud to have worked with Governor Quinn's folks on it, is that we helped create 300 jobs for the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Those jobs are a call center with the Illinois Tollway, housed at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I also serve on the board of the Streetwise organization. So those individuals who you see out there selling newspapers and magazines, make sure you buy them, because this helps them to be entrepreneurs and to keep from becoming homeless. I serve on the MLK Dream Classic board along with Coach Dorothy Gators. We put on a tournament every year for the last 10 years. And basically, it's a tournament made up of 60+ teams from around the country, of young high school teams, boys and girls. And we honor Dr. Martin Luther King's dream through athletics. And I serve on the University of Dayton School of Law Advisory Committee. And that gives me an opportunity to help people who want to go to law school, Coach Rice, an opportunity to go to law school. Thank you.
Okay, next question. We'll start from this end and just alternate as we go along. Given that the structure of organizations are the members or the board members serve at the pleasure of the president, what is your position of Cook County President Preckwinkle's taking control of the nonviolent inmate release program formerly managed by Sheriff Dart?
Well, first let me just clarify something. I didn't know that members of the Cook County Board serve at the pleasure of President Preckwinkle. I think we serve at the pleasure of our constituency. I mean, we have a district. So as long as our district continues to represent us or elect us, we have our seat and we represent them. So with all due respect, I mean, I'll work with President Preckwinkle, but where there are differences and divergencies in terms of the district, the first district, that is my priority. That's where my heart is, and that's where I'll advocate. I will work with Sheriff Tom Dart. I said, look, Sheriff Tom Dart has endorsed our campaign, and I'm proud of that. I think Sheriff Tom Dart has done a tremendous job as Cook County Sheriff. He's shepherded a number of issues that he's had to deal with, the cemetery, a crisis among them, and I think he's done a tremendous job. I will work with Sheriff Tom Dart. I'll work with Chief Judge Timothy Evans. I'll work with State's Attorney Anita Alvarez to figure out a way to reduce the prison population at Cook County Jail. I've been successful at bringing people together over the last 21 years. We've done big things, and we've gotten things done because we've been a bridge builder. And I'll continue to do that as your leader on the Cook County Board.
Well, there's certainly no question that President Preckwinkle has made a bold move, and I think I talked about this earlier, the fact that she wants to put more people on electronic monitoring. But as I indicated, Sheriff Dart maybe has done some good things. I mean, all of them do some good things. But the fact of the matter is, Sheriff Dart today could have far more people on electronic monitoring if he chose to do it. The law allows him to have 1,500 people. He only has 250. So it's really interesting when people say one thing and do another. Nothing's stopping him from allowing another 700, 800, 900 people from being on electronic monitoring today, other than politics. And politics sometimes gets in the way. So I applaud the president for wanting to put more people on electronic monitoring, and it's the right thing to do, and actually Sheriff Dart should be doing that today. We shouldn't be waiting to turn it over to somebody else, passing the buck to the president of the county board. He should be doing that today.
I kind of spoke on this earlier today, and I did say that I do believe that President Preckwinkle is taking a bold step, and she's showing leadership. It doesn't always necessarily mean that when you do something that you're going to get positive results, but she sees there's a problem. And she sees that the sheriff who could make this problem go away isn't willing to move. And I agree with Ike that I think Sheriff Dart is looking at his political career. He doesn't want anything that could tarnish it. He's good for great publicity, but he's not willing to make the hard decision, which is making sure those individuals who should be out on electronic monitor should be out. And I think that we cannot allow elected officials to play games with our lives because of their own personal political interests. We need to call them out. I would say to Sheriff Dart, if I was the commissioner, release those prisoners, period. You know, the bottom line is it should be done. And at the end, and you know, I will say this. I trust that Tony has done her research. I trust that Tony has decided that there is some political risk to this, but she also knows that this has to be dealt with because of a fiscal problem that we're facing. She understands this is more than just letting people out, but it impacts our budget. So she is also looking at this from a fiscal perspective as well. So I commend her for taking on that challenge and hope that there will be no negative feedback on her because of it.
I certainly appreciate the work that President Preckwinkle has done, but to the first part of that question, let me be clear. I do not serve at the pleasure of President Preckwinkle. I serve at the pleasure of the First District and to the constituents in this room who I hope will vote for me. With that being said, when it comes to who is administering the policy, I think it was Malcolm X who says, I want the truth. I don't care who's telling it. That's how I feel about policies. I want good policies. I don't care where it comes from. If it comes from President Preckwinkle, that's great. If it comes from Sheriff Dart, that's great. My attitude on this sport is to build relationships with people who will help us, people who will improve our district. That's what matters to me. People over politics. That has to be the focus of this race. Keep switching sides on me here. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have at least 3 more questions, and then we'll try to wrap it up. We see people getting a little antsy there. This is a twofold question, so if you can be brief with this one, and our next question is a longer question for you to respond to. Do you support living wage increase? And then the second part of this is, what are you doing for children now, and what are you prepared to do for our youth if you're elected?
I mentioned earlier the work the Shriver Center is doing to advocate for a living wage. I do believe in a living wage. Frankly, I think $10.10 an hour is still too low. Anyone who looks at the numbers at what that goes to throughout the year, from my understanding, it's still below $20-some-odd thousand. I think the minimum wage needs to be much higher. There's a group in the, well, I know it's represented here today, Action Now, and they've been advocating for a minimum wage at about $15, if I understand correctly. Let me tell you this, it certainly needs to be a whole lot higher than even $10.10 an hour. What do I do with the youth? Just yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak at what they call a half cap at Morton School of Excellence. Basically what a half cap is, the kids are the 8th graders there, they were halfway through the school year, and the principal thought it'd be a good idea to help motivate them for graduation. It's kind of like a mock graduation. So the first thing, and it's a small thing, but anytime I get a chance, I break away from my office and I go and I talk to kids. I go and I share my experience. I tell them, hey, I don't have the answers, but guess what? I grew up on the corner of Chicago and Laramie. I'm still in the Austin neighborhood. I'm committed to the community, and I've been fortunate to be where I am today. The message I always tell them is, guess what? There's nothing special about me. I know that might sound strange for somebody to say that, but people always say, wow, you must be special. But I always tell these kids, no, because you can do it too. This thought that some people are just special and just born with some capabilities that are better than others, that bothers me sometimes. Because I think if we give everyone the same opportunity, if we invest in our kids early, I'll tell you, I've met so many who are brighter than I ever was at that age. If we just invest in them now, we'd be amazed at what we see. In addition to that, I think the juvenile justice is a significant issue. And the laws that govern juvenile justice are state laws. Those are not ones we control as commissioner. But I will advocate for juvenile justice reform, especially in the environment of sealing and expungement. We need to have automatic expungement for juvenile crimes. If we do that, our kids won't be branded with a criminal record as young as 15, 16, 17 years old that will turn them into a permanent underclass because they cannot get jobs.
The question of whether I support living wage, yes, I definitely support it. I think that, but it has to be twofold. You can't just support a living wage and not increase the earned income tax credit. You got to have both if it's going to work. Increasing the wages and keeping the tax rate at the rate it is doesn't do anything but defeat the purpose, because what that rate does is increase their tax rate. That put them in a higher tax bracket. So we have to increase the earned income tax credit with the living wage. And I'll call on my congressman to work to make sure that the federal government make that happen. So, Congressman Davis, yes. Now, as for what I do for young people, right now, I donate resources to school teachers who are looking for materials or programs to support their classrooms. I give money to the school teachers to buy whatever materials or supplies they need in order to do the type of programs or whatever they think they need to make sure that their class is successful. That's one of the things I do. I think sometimes being able to do what you can is just as important as other things you can do. I can go and read, and I do read to the students, but giving the money to the teachers to make sure that they have what they need to help those students is one of the things that I do. The other thing that I like to do once I'm elected is to take contributions that I receive, 10% of the donations I receive. I like to set that money aside and provide a donor choice program for schools in our districts, which will allow them to come to my office and say, Mr. Lawless, we'd like to put on a program and we'd like to buy some materials, and I want to be able to say, we have the money for that. I think if I can raise the money for me to run for public office, I think a percentage of that should be put aside to help our children and help our schools. That's what I will continue to do if elected.
There's certainly no question that the minimum wage needs to be raised, and it's certainly unfortunate that the minimum wage for the country is only $7.25 an hour. If it wasn't for the fact of Illinois, and Illinois is $8.25, but in the country it's only $7.25 an hour. So it goes to show you what we're really dealing with in terms of the disparity of the minimum wage. So certainly I would support that. I do think that the governor is on point in talking about and suggesting a raise to $10 an hour. I work with people every single day who are looking for employment, every single day, who call me up, young people, older people, looking for opportunity. Young people, older people, it doesn't make a difference. Some of them are only 18, 19, 20 years old. Every single day, I'm out trying to find either a training program or an employment opportunity for someone who needs it. I work with young people throughout schools all the time. I get calls all the time to come speak in schools to young people. I work in the Alderman Mitt's office and talking to young people in her programs. So in terms of working with young people, it's something that I do every single day, because that is our charge. If we've been in any kind of leadership position, then we have a responsibility to try to help somebody else along the way. I really believe that. And if everyone did that, involved in government or even civic, if everyone else tried to help somebody along the way, we'd be much further along than what we are now. So I'm pleased to support the minimum wage increase, and along with that, I think we should add some type of, I keep saying this, training and job linkage. Because you can raise the minimum wage all you want, but guess what? You have to have a job to go to get the minimum wage. That's another very important component. If there's no job for you, then it could be $10 an hour. If you can't work, it doesn't serve you. You're in the same place you were before. Thank you.
I'm pleased to have the support of the Chicago Federation of Labor. Over 500,000 working class men and women who've endorsed our campaign. We stand for an increase in the minimum wage. We've been for it for a long time. We've been supportive of it. It's an idea whose time has arrived, and we're hopeful that we will get that done. We'll continue to advocate for that. Every year, I've been blessed with resources, and so every year for the past 7, 8 years, I've given away to children in scholarship money at least $30,000 to $35,000 every year in just scholarships. We've supported organizations like the Westside Branch of the NAACP. Their backpacks that they hand out every summer. We've supported that program almost every year. And if we haven't supported that program, we've supported the Freedom Fund dinners. We've been a speaker at the Freedom Fund. We've been an awardee and honoree at the Freedom Fund dinners. I've served as principal for the day in Chicago Public Schools several years in a row, where I've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of young people. I've established scholarships that I fund every year all around the country, one in my grandmother's honor and my grandfather. My grandmother's 97 years young, and she's still going strong, birthday in April. I put a scholarship in Congressman Danny Davis's name. He doesn't know about it, but it's at the University of Dayton School of Law for a minority student, a $5,000 scholarship that I fund every year. Sankofa Safe Child Initiative, we funded that program. And so I'm proud to say that we give away a lot of money, and Coach Rice's football team, we've given them money. So I'm proud to say that too. Thanks.
Next question. Okay, the next question is, what's your plan to obtain more CDB funds to improve economic development, especially for the suburban areas in the first district. So we'll start on this end.
Okay, so CDBG funds are community development block grants, and those funds come from Washington, and they go to the state, and then they're parceled out from the state. And so this is a good question. What we would do is we would be an advocate for the county taxpayers, not just the first district, but everybody. We go to Washington, we'd work with our congressional delegation to increase the appropriation, the amount of money that's flowing from Washington to the state of Illinois relative to community development block grants. And then we would work with our legislative delegation here in Illinois, knowing that we got that increased funding, and we would try to get as much of that money back to the first district as possible. See, we don't want our fair share. We want more than our fair share, because for too long, we haven't gotten our fair share. And so we want more than that. And so we would leverage our relationships with the members of Congress, who I had the opportunity of working with for 13 years, and we leverage our relationships with state legislators, who I'm proud to say a number of them are supporting our campaign. We leverage our relationship with the governor and those individual mayors in the district. We have 7 suburban communities. We have Oak Park, Forest Park, Bellwood, Broadview, Maywood, Hillside, and Westchester. And I'm pleased to say that we've received the endorsement of all 7 mayors. And so I'm happy about that. We hope to receive your endorsement, but we would get those funds increased and we put them to work in our community. And we would get the economic development engine going. Because when we got economic development going, that means we got some money being circulated. And that means people are able to live and provide for their families. And that's what we need. We got too many poor people who are working paycheck to paycheck or who aren't working at all. The unemployment rate for young people is astronomically high. It's triple and quadruple that of the national average, especially when you look at African American males. We got to get them back to work, so we'd work to do that.
Thank you. Certainly, CDBG block grants is something I'm very familiar with. The city of Chicago always had the opportunity to grant those grants to various organizations. So it's something that I will continue to do and work harder for the suburban area. But the question was, as I recall, what about the suburban area? And it's interesting that if this money is already coming, we'd have to look and see why is the suburbs not getting it now? Or why are they not getting their fair share now? What's wrong with government that suburban area maybe is not getting its fair share? Well, I think one thing I do know about CDBG is it's an application process. That's the first thing. It's an application process. And anytime you're getting free money from the government, the paperwork is about this tall. That's what it is. There's no question. It's a foot of paperwork to even get those grants. I think we need to establish some workshops in the suburban area, specifically for folks who are interested in receiving those funds. And you also need to know one thing. Typically, those funds go to organizations that are already up and running. The organization who's going to be least likely to receive those funds are the startups. They prefer to fund organizations that's already doing something on their own. You have to already have your bricks and mortar in place. You're not going to build your building with CDBG. CDBG is only part and parcel of your budget to keep things going. But I think we have to educate folk about the process, because a lot of people apply and then their paperwork is turned right around because there's something wrong with their paperwork, and it happens all the time, particularly in our community. So we have to educate folk, create a workshop of folk who are really interested, and get everybody at the table. Now, I am very interested in what my colleague said about the fact that we have all the suburban mayors involved and all where the money's coming from, and we need to examine what's going on now. Why is it we have a void right now in CDBG funds in certain areas? So I think the workshop would be appropriate and to educate everybody, and we can move forward from there.
I think when I go through communities like Maywood, Bellwood, and Broadview, and and I know they receive CDBG money, one of the things that I gotta ask as a commissioner is first, assess what has been done with the money so far. You don't just give money without knowing what has been done with the money beforehand. I think in some cases, a lot of that money is abused. I've heard people say that these groups, these organizations are abusing some of this money. And when people make those allegations, I have to be on top of that. I need to investigate to see whether or not there's any truth to that, because it makes no sense to increase the money for these areas and we're giving it to the same groups that are doing nothing with it. I think that when you have someone like Richard Boykin, who has had 13 years with the congressman, and if I'm so fortunate to win this election, I would like for him, as he said, he would work with us to use that resource of his to help us continue to bring those dollars to our communities. Because we need to work together, and I think we need to continue to work together whether we win or lose. Because if you have certain expertise, I need to tap into that. That's just the bottom line. He has it, I need to tap into it. I think that what we need to do is to make sure that when these funds come, as Ike said, it's an application process. And most of the community groups that get these applications have been groups that have been around for a long, long time, like Bethel New Life and other groups. But the reality is that there are a lot of new groups out here who could and should receive some of these money because I think they have some good missions. So I think at the end of the day, one of the first things I want to do before we start talking about bringing more money in is to, because everybody's going to want to know, well, what are you doing with the money already? And I want to know, what are we doing with the money to ensure that either that group should get the money some more or we need to give it to another group. I'm not planning on giving money to a group that hasn't done anything with it already. So let's be real here. We get the money, but let's first find out what's happening with the money, and then we can then determine from there how we move forward with how we fund these programs in the future.
Whenever you're working with community-based grants like this, the place you have to start foremost is with the community, period, at the grassroots level. I want to give you all an example of a time when I was working on a similar project with the NAACP. As a part of the mortgage fraud settlement that happened last year, Lisa Madigan received, over the Attorney General's office representing the state of Illinois, received over $100-some-odd million. They issued an RFP to people and organizations throughout the state of Illinois who might be interested in getting this money for community development. I was a part of a group with the NAACP. It was led actually by Phyllis Logan. We sat down, we put together an application for that. Now, we didn't get any money from that process. The land bank, however, did. That's one of the reasons why I put so much emphasis on land banking, because I believe that no one knows better about how we can spend money and resources than the people who already are in the community. I will take that same approach whether we're talking about these type of development grants or whether we're talking about others. So it starts with being a commissioner who's already in the community and working with people in the community, and who always starts there. The first place where I go won't be outside of us, the stakeholders, the people who live here, who are invested here, and who truly know how we can best improve our communities. If we start every application there, in my office, I will have a staff that is receptive, one that's able to bring people together, one that can handle things like the paperwork, so you don't have to. We can work together, bringing the ideas, pooling our resources. If we do that, we'll always succeed. We'll always be able to bring more resources to the city part of the district and the suburban part of the district. And that's something I'm proud about with this race. Born and raised in Austin, I love Austin. I will be a commissioner, though, that represents the entire district, both city and suburban. Got you this time.
No, we stated that was the last question, but this is my question. If the audience doesn't mind, I do have questions. I am a voter. Do live in the district. One of the things that we've worked with the NAACP, and I'm over housing, which covers an economic development, which covers a lot of the questions that we've asked, reference to the questions that we asked. The Cook County Board did establish the Cook County Land Bank Authority, and they've just hired a CEO and executive director, so now they're ready to move forward with its agenda. We want to know if you guys are familiar with it. We heard some echoes here. And the authority, are you familiar with the authority, and how do you plan to keep the community aware of the opportunities, such as the contracts and the jobs, that will come from the Cook County Land Bank, it will be awarded. We know that it has already been awarded, but it will be awarded federal and state dollars to fulfill its purpose. How will you keep us aware of the opportunities, such as those contracts? Let us know.
During our introduction, when I was asked about the three main issues, the land bank was one of those three. It's brand new, something that was just created last year in 2013, has a very small investment of funds, only $6 million, but I think it's something that any commissioner who represents the first district has to understand how important this is now and how important it can be in the future for community development. That is why I have placed a high priority on talking about land banking. Now, the Cook County Land Bank Authority has its own separate board. I understand why organizations do that. You want to have a separate board to try to keep out undue political influence. At the same time, as I just said, I believe that no one knows better about what should be done in our community than us, than the very people who are in this room. I will be a commissioner who not only advocates to the Land Banking Authority, but one who keeps you up to date on what it's doing and how our community can benefit. One thing that I'd like to do as a part of that is commissioner on your corner. That's what I call it. That'll be me coming and meeting you wherever you are. I'll come to your churches, I'll come to your block club parties, I'll talk to you about things that we're doing, and that'll include updates about the land bank and how you can get jobs and find employment with that. I take pride in being a commissioner who, yes, holds regular office hours, you can find me there, but also being one who comes and meets you where you are. And that's why I'm happy about the way we started this campaign, meeting people at trains, knocking on doors. That's the type of commissioner I want to be. The best way to keep people informed on what's going on is being someone who comes out and meets them where they are. That's the commissioner I'll be.
Thank you. I'm very familiar with the Land Bank Commission. I was at their meeting this past week. And you know what was the one of the most glaring thing that I saw or didn't see? There was not one West Side commissioner from on the Cook County Board that was sitting at the table. Now, how can you bring back information if you're not at the table? I heard all the discussions that they were talking about. We were talking about zombie properties, where properties are not, where investors are not even interested in, and they're just sitting there. The banks have released the lien, and the property is just sitting there because the homeowner is sitting there not knowing what's the next thing that's going to happen to their property. So they're not doing anything to upkeep that property because they don't know whether or not the property is going to be there. It is, in my mind, criminal that we do not have a commissioner from the West Side on that committee right now, because most of the issues that they were talking about impacts our community: foreclosures, homes that are dilapidated, homes that need to be torn down. And you know, if we're going to have leadership, leadership has to be at the table. And we need to talk to the people in the community that know more about this process than we do. We don't have to go in there and know everything. We have people in the community that knows information, and we should be talking to them. One more thing. I know Richard said he's endorsed by the CFL, but I'm going to tell you right now, I will be there to block the CFL if they're not working to ensure people in our community are getting those jobs. I am tired of seeing out-of-state plates coming in, getting jobs in our community because they're unionized. Why can't the CFL, which is saying that they're for the community, not working to ensure that people in our community get jobs? They have training programs. They need to ensure that those training programs are offered to the people in this community so they can get those jobs when those jobs come. Remember, the land bank is going to provide a lot of economic opportunity. So when I come to leadership, I will tell you this: if I need to step in the way, I will step in the way to protect the interests of the people of this district.
Thank you, Ryan. The land bank certainly is something that we need to keep our eye on. I mean, when it was announced, it certainly looked like it would do or bring a lot of opportunity for our communities, but it's in its infancy stages. We don't know yet just really what it's going to do for us. Now, we know they're hiring people. We know folks going to work. We know they're paying some folk, but it really has not affected our community as of yet. And we're not sure how it's going to affect our community unless we really guide that legislation and look at it. I had an opportunity to speak with Commissioner Bridget Gaynor, who was one of the lead sponsors for that legislation. I'm supportive of it, but I want to make sure it's going to be inclusive and actually have an impact on the community to deal with the vacant buildings we have in our community. What impact is it really going to have, and who is it really going to affect? We don't want something to come in that the only folks going to benefit are those who are hired to work on the land bank, and then particular contractors, if it's driven their way, and different speculators as well. We want to make sure it's going to have impact on our community. So I'm very interested in pursuing it, but I want to make sure it's going to have impact. Right now it has $6 million. That's a pittance. I'm talking about $6 million for the whole Cook County. That's literally means it's almost broke at the end of the day. So I think we should look at it. I'm going to work closely with it. I want to work closely with Commissioner Gaynor, who was the lead sponsor for that legislation, to make sure that's effective and just not something that look good on paper and in newspapers, and they're not really affecting our community.
This is really about Wall Street being bailed out and Main Street being left out. I support the land bank. I've supported it since its inception. Bridget Gaynor ought to be applauded. President Preckwinkle ought to be applauded. I think we even need to do more. I think we need to look at some outside the box kind of strategies. Be creative. Work with faith-based communities and make sure that they too are involved in a significant way. I know my good friend Bishop Saffold sits on the board, and I'm proud of that, but we got to do more. Too many poor people are struggling and they don't have housing. Too many other folks are facing foreclosure, and we got to figure out a way to help them get out of the foreclosure dilemma so that they can keep their homes. And can you imagine how difficult it is to be out in the cold, minus 40 degree below wind chill? Can you imagine how difficult it is for families to struggle with housing? So I support the concept of 120%. And what I'll do is I promise you to be like Congressman Davis, because I learned everything almost that I know about public service from him. And that is, the best thing you can do is to hold town hall meetings, to be responsive to people, to set up task forces. So we'll have a task force dedicated, devoted to just the land bank and housing and making sure that folks are getting their needs met relative to housing. We're committed to doing it. I will fight day and night with your interests and your concern in mind.
Very good. What we're going to allow the candidates to do now, and our chair for political action will come up in 5 minutes to make an announcement as well. We're going to allow the candidates 1 minute to give us a brief synopsis of why we should vote for them. I know 1 minute is not a lot, but you've heard a lot of their personalities as they've been responding to the questions that we've put them to task to answer. So if you could please take 1 minute and just tell us why we should vote for you. And if you guys out in the audience, we know that this room should have been filled today. The weather did not allow that to happen. I'm hoping that that was the rhyme and reason behind it. But for every one voter in this room, you need to let the candidates know you've got 100 behind you. So their comments that they make, the way they respond, what they're looking to do for us, representing us in the 1st District, we take all of that into consideration when we go and cast our votes. So with that, 1 minute, gentlemen, and I'll start here.
Put succinctly, because I care, I'm compassionate, and passionate about your issues. I had a conversation with a lady named Miss Jones. She was facing a crisis of property taxes. And she said to me, I paid one thing 30 years ago when I moved in here, and I'm paying this now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep my home. And then she said to me, my grandkids, a couple of them have gone to prison, and they actually need help finding jobs. And so I said to her, and I pledged to her, that I would be an advocate for her on the tax question and on helping her grandkids to find jobs. So I've worked for 13 years in Washington. I understand how to get things done. I've done them my entire life. I've brought people together. I've been a bridge builder. I've brought people from different backgrounds together to work on your behalf and to get big things done. And we'll do that at the county board. We'll work with the other 16 commissioners and the president to move the first district forward. We will be responsive, we'll provide ethical leadership, and we'll work with Sheriff Tom Dart and others to make the first district the district that God has called it to be.
I first would certainly like to thank the NAACP for the opportunity to be here. And I certainly like to thank all of you for taking out time to listening to all of us. When we talk about this office, one thing that I've learned in politics, you can say whatever you want to say when you're trying to get elected. There's no question. But I also know when you have a record of success. I believe if you look at what I did in 29th Ward, in terms of working with other aldermen, working with state legislators, I bridged that gap, supporting Democrats all my life. You need to peel back the onion a little bit further than just today. And look at us. I've always been a Democrat, and it's always about democratic leadership. And you won't find that to be the case amongst all of us today. When you peel back the onion, you will find some distinct differences in philosophy on who we support in terms of Democrats. If you look at my leadership in 29th Ward, you will find out it has been stellar. I made some mistakes, there's no question about it. There's no question about it, and I regret that. But, and thank you, Princess, for always letting us know the time. But this is the end now. But I think if you vote for Ike Carruthers and punch 103 on March 18th, I will bring the same skills back to you that I used in 29th Ward to show and make a successful first district.
I got my feet wet in politics through the Harold Washington era. If I have to say, my lesson in politics was from someone who I think was one of our greatest political leaders. And I'm glad to be able to say that what I know about my politics is because of him. And I still believe that we have not had anyone like him in leadership since his death. And I hope and pray that we will one day have that person again. I'm an independent. The only endorsement I concern myself with and the only endorsement I care about is yours. Because you know what? All the mayors have only one vote. I'm concerned about elected officials who would make endorsements without first talking to all the candidates to know what they have to bring to the table. So that's why I say to you, I don't want their endorsements because I think there's a character flaw there. I want your endorsement because that's the only endorsement that counts. Because at the end of the day, everybody has one vote and only one vote. And that's the one vote I'm concerned with is yours. I went to Cook County Hospital on January 2nd. I saw a few men there. They all had county care. And you know what they said to me? They said, I wanted to know what they thought about county care. One person said, you know, I am glad to be able, for the first time in my life, have health insurance. And I thought about, man, we have come a long way, and we can do more, and we can do better. I felt his pain. and I feel your pain. And at the end of the day, I want you to know I'm going to go out there and work for you and make sure that I do the best job I can for you as Cook County Commissioner of the 1st District. And I ask that you punch 106 for Ronald Lawless.
Let me thank everyone involved today in organizing this event at the NAACP and each and every one of you for caring enough about your community to come here and to join us this afternoon. My name is Blake Searcy, and you should vote for me because you know me. Even if you don't know my name, even if this is the first time you've met, you know me. Why? Because I'm from here. I'm that kid who was born and raised in the Austin neighborhood to a single-parent mom, that kid who had crazy ideas about what our community might be if we all came together, if we worked together, and what we could do. I'm not any different from your own kids, your own brothers and sisters, ones who you've raised here, who you hoped for better. I am proud to be from this neighborhood. I can think of no better honor, no law firm, no job, no amount of money. Nothing better for me than to be able to serve you as 1st District Cook County Commissioner. And it's not because of me. This isn't about me. I know that working together, we can move Cook County forward. Again, my name is Blake Searcy. Thank you.
So once again, we want to thank all of the candidates for showing up today. So to close us out, I want to call up Janicia Williams, and she's going to close us out with one of her poems. Thank you all again for coming.
Hi, I'm Janicia Williams. Excuse my attire. I didn't come prepared to say a speech, but anyway, I will be reciting an excerpt from one of Reverend Jesse Jackson's most influential speeches. America dream. Dream of a new value system. Teachers who teach for life and not just for a living. Teach because they can't help it. Dream of lawyers who are more concerned about justice than a judgeship. Dream of doctors more concerned about public health than personal wealth. Dream of preachers and priests who will prophesy and not just profiteer. America, preach and dream. Our time has come. Our time has come. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. And in the end, faith will not disappoint because our time has come. Our faith, hope, and dreams will prevail because our time has come. No grave can hold our body down. Our time has come. No lie can live forever. Our time has come. Weeping has endured for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Our time has come. Give them your tired. Give them your poor. Give them your huddled masses, and come March, you will yearn free because America, our time has come. Thank you.